As some of you may have noticed, Unreal Engine version 5.5 preview is now available on the Epic Games launcher. So in today's video, we're going to be diving in and seeing what's new in the world of audio. So let's get started. So to kick things off, we're going to start by looking at our plugins menu. And if we come over here to audio and we scroll through this list, you'll notice that, well, it's all still the same, with one small exception. I will put a screenshot up on the screen because this is no longer in the audio plugins menu. So if you are using the OSC modulation mixing plugin, that is something that is no longer listed here in 5.5. It's the only thing that I've noticed that's different. I'm not sure if it got absorbed into something else or just got left by the wayside. In 5.4, it did have the experimental tag next to it, like you see here with the audio motor sim and the audio insights. So I don't know if Epic just decided to let it go, if it was something that wasn't necessarily working out, or like I said, if it got absorbed into something else. But as far as audio plugins go, with the exception of the OSC modulation mixing, everything here is identical, including the experimental and beta tags. So now let's go ahead and open up a Metasound, because this is actually where the bulk of the updates are going to come in. Now, for those of you who work inside Metasounds pretty regularly, you're going to notice right off the bat that the color palette is a little more muted. Nothing major, just a slightly different color scheme. You'll also notice that now, in addition to having our time and our CPU core percentage, we also now have a relative render cost. This is going to be a really informative metric for those of you who are adding a lot of Metasounds to your project. If we're looking underneath our Metasound and source menus, you will find that everything is still pretty much the same. With the small exception of underneath both menus, you'll find the same drop down for advanced. This is the section that houses the asset user data. Typically, this is found inside the details panel if you drag a Metasound into your viewport. And now you'll actually find this inside the Metasound itself. Under our interfaces, we do have one new one, and that is the UE source start time, which, if I'm being completely honest, I'm not sure what the difference between this is and just simply making a time-based input, something that we've kind of always had the ability to do. So I'm not sure if there is something different or if this is just now an added to the interface menu for just a quality of life improvement. Speaking of quality of life improvements, let's take a look at our Wave Player, which most of you are pretty familiar with at this point. And you'll notice that we now have a collapsed Wave Player, and we have the ability to expand this out. And you'll see as I flip back and forth between these, basically what it's hiding is some of the lesser used pins. So for example, the loop start and loop duration, and then on the right side, it's going to be a lot of your cue points and things like that. So with that, you'll also notice that some of this is now slightly reordered, and that's, I'm assuming, just to kind of help clean things up when the node is collapsed. Now with a Wave Player in here, I'm going to go ahead and throw an audio file in here. Go ahead and make that loop. And I'm going to turn this down because we're not too worried about the sound that it's playing. But if we hit play and we now open this up, one of the subtle differences that you'll notice is that our spectrogram is now in color. And you may have seen it flash up there as I moused over, but we now also have the ability to, in real time, analyze the amplitude of a specific frequency while our audio file is playing. I can go ahead and make this a little bigger. And so this is really great if you have just kind of one audio file maybe that has some frequencies peaking out, but you're not quite sure where it is and you want to tame it a little bit. So this is going to help with real-time analyzing of where your potential frequency problems are. And since we're talking about the spectralizer, I do also want to point out, and albeit this is not a new feature to 5.5, this is just simply something that I discovered while making this video. You can actually right click on your spectralizer and you have all sorts of different settings that you can have here as well. So for example, showing the actual numbers on the graph and things like that. This is available in 5.4. I just didn't notice it until now. So now let's jump into the section of the video that I'm sure you're all waiting for. And that's to see if there are any new nodes within Metasounds. And there are. The first node that we're going to take a look at is actually a node that has been in Metasounds for quite a while, but has received a facelift, so to speak. And that is our get random. Now with get randoms, we've always had this enabled share state, which allows data that's passed through multiple get randoms to kind of share the same state so that they don't inadvertently pull the exact same asset from an array that a previous get random has already pulled. The difference now is that we can decide how that shared state behavior functions. So by default, it is the same node in the composition, which means if we were to have multiple of these inside the same Metasound and we click the share state button, all of these nodes would behave exactly the same. But if we drop this down, you'll see that we have a couple more options here. So for example, we have the same node, which shares the same state as other instances with this specific node. So for example, if you are copy and pasting multiple Metasounds throughout your project, those, because it is the exact same get random node, it will share state across all of those. And the other one that we have is shared data, which means basically regardless of what Metasound it's going into, if it is pulling from the same asset array, then it will share states. But if it's pulling from a different asset array or variable, then it will not. The next node that we're going to take a look at is another node that we technically have had, and that is our get wave info. Now, up until 5.5, you may have been familiar with the get wave duration, and this still has that functionality, but now it's just kind of gotten a new name and a couple more pins so that now we can also spit out the name of the file and the path of that file. The next new node that we have is going to be get last index. And you'll see that we have quite a few different variations of this, but essentially what it's going to do is it's going to look at an array that you have. The example that I'm showing here is time, but as you saw before, there were plenty of different ones. Basically, what it's going to do is it's going to take that array and it's going to spit out as an integer the last index. And so this would be useful for if you need to know how many different elements are in that array. As an example, and because arrays always start with 0, let's say we had an array with 10 elements in it. That is going to be 0 through 9. And so then our last index integer it's going to spit out is going to be the integer number 9. The next new node that we have is going to be our trigger compare music timestamp. And this is going to work just like your other trigger compares, except now the data that we're comparing is timestamp data. And then we can fire off based on true or false, depending on what we set here, but it's all based off of that timestamp data. Now, the last new node that we're going to talk about, and I've saved this for last for, I'm sure you could guess the reasons, but we now have plate reverb inside of MetaSounds. Over the last several years, a lot of you have been asking me how to apply reverbs to specific MetaSounds, and up until now, the only real way to add reverb was through the use of audio volumes or audio gameplay volumes. But now, in 5.5 preview, this is finally possible. So if we expand this out, you'll see that we have a lot of the same types of settings that you'll find on a typical reverb. You know, we've got our ins, our outs, our wet dries, our decay level, our gain level for makeup gain, the bandwidth, diffusion, dampening, decaying, and density. These are all settings that you can play with now and add reverb inside of a specific MetaSound without having to put that MetaSound inside of an audio volume. Now, I'll probably end up doing a video dedicated specifically to this, so right now I'm not going to be diving into this, but this is definitely a very exciting addition to MetaSounds. Now, to wind things back down, we're going to take a look at the details panel if we were to drag a MetaSound into our viewport. And what we're going to find here is actually just some more quality of life improvements. And we don't really need to scroll at all to see these changes. So up until 5.4, we only had the ability to select an asset from the content browser. Say you had one already highlighted in your content browser, or if you already have a MetaSound or an asset here, you can browse to it. Now, we also have this little play button. Now, admittedly, it does the exact same thing as this play button down here, except now you don't have to move your mouse a few hundred pixels. Another new addition that we have is the high pass filter. Now, previously, when you pulled a MetaSound into your viewport, you did have access to this low pass, and it's just really nice now that we have access to this high pass as well. And that way, if you are dragging multiple instances of the same MetaSound into your viewport, you can kind of come in here and now overwrite the high pass for this specific instance, just like you would with the low pass. All right, guys, so that is going to wrap things up. If there's anything that you've noticed that I've missed, please let me know in the comments section. You know, I know that this was kind of a shorter video, and a lot of that is because what we've received is more so quality of life improvements, although I am very excited to dive into the new reverb node inside the MetaSounds. So if you guys like what you saw, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the notification bell so you never miss out on any future content. And if you'd like to be a part of the Sound Effects Guy Discord server, you'll find a link in the description below. Until next time.